Hi, welcome to episode 364 of the Lean Blog Interviews podcast. I'm Mark Graven, and we're joined today by a returning guest. He is Mitch Cahn, the president of a company in New Jersey called Unionwear. He was previously a guest on episode 234, so if you want to hear more about Mitch and their first years with Lean, you can go back and hear that episode for some background, but we're going to hear about what's new and the current challenges that you're facing. Mitch, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to talk to you again. So, we'll be able to weave Lean into the story, and it'd be good to hear about how the company has progressed. But right now, what's the urgent situation that you and the company have been thrown into? Tell us about that.
So we manufacture baseball hats and bags, like tote bags and backpacks. And up until the first week of March, we were rocking. We were manufacturing baseball caps for basically every candidate for president. I have a bunch of examples up behind me here.
Yeah.
We were working on all of those the first week of March. We had about 175 people. We were trying to add more people, and a few things happened the first week of March. One is that basically everyone dropped out of the race. And the second is the coronavirus. With the coronavirus, in short order, a lot of our jobs were canceled. We do a lot of event merchandise, so a lot of events were canceled. Some of our military projects were scaled back because things were defunded to make funds available for emergency relief. And we do some retail work. A lot of retail stores were closed. And we found ourselves from having a tough time keeping up with orders, working at full capacity, to not having a lot to do. We decided that we needed to come up with a new business model to carry us through this crisis. And in the past, been in business for almost 30 years. We had made a lot of textile products for the medical industry, most of them on the military side, like first aid packs. But we'd bid on a lot of projects, and I knew there were a lot of opportunities. So kind of jumped right in and said, what can we do? Called everyone that I knew who had contacts with hospitals and in the medical business, and came up with a list of products that we could possibly make for the medical industry.
And so how did that work out then in terms of your sewing capabilities, your workforce, your materials? I mean, some of this, it seems like, fell really nicely into place for you to be able to do this.
Yeah, it took about, it's really amazing to think how quickly this happened. This process started maybe a month ago. We had a bunch of ideas of things we could make. We didn't know what hospitals needed. And one stroke of luck that we had is that our union, we're a union shop, our union is represented by the same union that represents the hospital workers in New York City. And I asked the head of the union, the international president of the union, said, look, we can help out here. We can do things for the hospitals. We have no idea what to make. At the time, about a month ago, all anyone was asking for was masks. And I took a look at the masks that they needed, and I said, does anyone realize that these are not sewn? There's no sewing that goes on in a certified mask, because the act of sewing puts a needle hole through the mask. Right. That allows germs to get in. But that's all anybody was asking us for. And we didn't have the capability to make those masks. We had the capability to do masks for consumers, but that wasn't something that we were interested in at the time. We wanted to get in and really help out the hospitals. So the union met with the Hospital Association in New York, who I guess they normally negotiate with, and they came up with a few products that could be sewn by the remaining textile manufacturers in that union. One of them was a face shield, which has a clear vinyl or plastic or PET front and a headband around it. And another is a hospital gown. And immediately jumped on board and started figuring out ways to make products that would satisfy their requirements. Keeping in mind that a lot of these products required FDA approved raw materials, which were simply not available in this country at the time. So we had to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to get something that the hospitals would accept. And we did. We did it in a relatively quick period of time. I mean, we actually had one product that was accepted right away with 2 or 3 days from the time I heard the term face shield for the first time until the time that we had an approved sample was about 2 or 3 days. We were lucky in that respect because when I saw what they were looking for, which was a clear vinyl front and a headband and some foam, I said, you know what? These are all items that we already have. I mean, every baseball hat. Oh, grab this here. Didn't think about this.
And for people who are listening to the traditional audio podcast, we're actually doing this as a video. So while Mitch is reaching up and grabbing hats, if you want to watch the conversation, you can go to leanblog.org/364. But Mitch, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically every baseball hat has a sweatband that goes around the inside of the hat. Mm-hmm. This is something that we make ourselves here. And face shields have a headband that go around the head. Every binder that we make portfolios and binders out of vinyl. Every binder has a clear plastic cover on it that usually stick papers in.
Yeah.
So we had clear plastic in all different thicknesses and sizes that we could work with. And every backpack that we make and every laptop bag we make has foam on the inside. And so we had a lot of foam. So these are 3 things, not only that we had in stock, but that we had suppliers and backup suppliers and probably 10 to 20 suppliers we'd already purchased from. Yes. So we already had suppliers for foam. We had suppliers for clear vinyl. We had suppliers for the materials that go into the headbands. We had suppliers for Velcro, elastic, anything that we could use to make these products adjustable. 10, 20 suppliers. And on day one, we started contacting all these suppliers, seeing what kind of inventory they had, seeing if they were open, seeing if they could back up the inventory, because we could see that if hundreds of millions of face shields were going to be needed in the country, there was going to be an issue getting raw materials.
Yeah.
So this is the initial face shield that we manufactured, which is basically a clear plastic in the front. It's got foam. It's got elastic, which stretches around the back. And we're making these by the tens of thousands pretty much every day. We started manufacturing them in-house, but we realized that there was going to be an issue getting people to work, an issue with people who are healthy that may be quarantined because they came in contact with someone. So very quickly, we established home sewing procedures where we have a lot of employees who have machines at home. We actually designed the product to make sure that it could be done on a home sewing machine. For example, we initially had the foam being sewn to the plastic, which can be done by an industrial machine, but can't be done by a home sewing machine. So we transitioned to have that foam applied by basically a double stick tape or glue, and just had the elastic sewn to the plastic. And established all sorts of procedures like pick up and drop off, a safe space to drop the goods off so you don't have to come in contact with anybody, making sure if we were hiring people from the outside that they could be paid by PayPal or Venmo. It's been a daily process to tweak the procedures that we need to do to maintain the volume that we've been able to maintain. And we're still interested in growing this volume a lot because there's still way more demand than supply for protective equipment. Growing this volume probably means adding a lot of additional home sewers while our state, New Jersey, is still under lockdown, and it's planning to be locked down for 5 or 6 weeks now. So a lot of challenges there, a lot of challenges, and lean manufacturing and all the principles that we learned in lean have definitely helped us overcome those challenges.
Yeah. So I'd like to explore that. Couple follow-up questions, just out of curiosity. In this era, was there an accelerated FDA approval process or kind of special waivers granted for certain products? Or
there have been no waivers. There have been no FDA approval process. There was Definitely issues with the hospitals not wanting anything that's not FDA approved and being in denial that they could get something. A lot of conversations where they were so many conversations where people were under the impression that the stuff that they ordered 3 months ago that they were promised it's going to come in another week or two was actually going to come in a week or two, and they just needed stuff to get through this week. If they have to wait for FDA approval, they might as well wait for the stuff that's coming in from China. That stuff's still not coming. And not only that, the raw materials are in China, because if all of the sewing is in China, why would people make the raw materials here and store them here? They're all in China too. And guess what? China's not letting go of it. And even if they wanted to let go of it, there are all sorts of logistical problems here.
Right.
One thing that I don't fully, I am speaking out of turn here, and I'm speaking anecdotally, but I've been informed that one of the issues is that when the coronavirus hit, most of the shipments and the ships and the containers were all headed to the United States, did not return to China. So there's a shortage of freighters over there, and there's a shortage of containers over there.
Wow.
That needs to be unwound before goods can even start to come over here en masse.
Wow.
So anyway, to answer your question, there was no approval. Okay. We had to convince the hospital buyers that what we were making would pass the FDA tests that were necessary. There are certain FDA tests that we consider necessary, certain that weren't necessary. Things like water resistance and water repellency. That's something that was necessary. Things like stain release, that may not have been so necessary, especially if this is something that was going to be discarded. Yeah. Another issue we encountered, and this is with the gowns, we're manufacturing hospital and isolation gowns now too, is just the cost differential between what was coming in from China and what they were getting domestically was enormous. In China, the material's cheap, the labor's cheap, the construction was really cheap, and the garment was meant to be discarded. No one here could make a garment meant to be discarded in America. That's just not something that we're set up to do. So anything that takes labor is going to cost money in America. So and this was not my idea, this was the Hospital Association's idea of New York, but to replace the disposable garments with something that could be washed at an extremely high heat 50 times. Right. So that the cost per use ends up being similar to that of the disposable garment. And that's something the hospitals were willing to go for. So we basically had to create these specs, get test results from a manufacturer, but no FDA approval. And we were very clear about that.
Okay. So earlier you said it took a couple of days. It took a couple of days to get the hospital buyers to agree that what you could produce would be acceptable.
No, that took longer than a couple of days.
That took longer. Okay.
It took a couple of days to come up with the prototype that we knew we could do. And we've been improving that prototype every single day since then as we're getting feedback from buyers. Yeah, we were able to get the ball rolling in something that normally would have taken a month. We banded together with our suppliers and our employees and got done in 2 or 3 days.
Wow. I'm curious, you talk about, you got some people working from home. You still have, you said 50 or fewer people in the usual facility. They're having to be spaced out. How is that changing manufacturing right now?
Yeah, so they do have to be spaced out. And as a lean manufacturer, we're used to single piece flow. Right. So we've had to change the way that we manufacture. In certain instances, we're using cells. In other instances, we're having one operator do the entire garment because it's actually more efficient than having a production line do it when they have to be spaced out. And we want them to be spaced out. And we also don't want multiple people touching the same garment or the same product.
Yeah.
We are supplying the workers with gowns, the hospital gowns that we make, the masks that we make, the shields that we make, sanitizer and gloves. And it's basically a challenge to get 30 to 40 people in every day out of 180. So we have people on call, and we're doing the best that we can to get people in. But we don't want people in who've been exposed. Right. we don't have anybody sick yet, which is almost amazing given the number of people that we have and that we're in a hotspot.
Yeah.
Not only are we in a hotspot, we're in a hotspot within a hotspot. We're in a neighborhood in Newark that's considered a hotspot. Maybe early on, we were very into educating people on the hygiene, health, and making sure they had accurate information on how to stay safe. So that's possibly been very helpful. Another reason I think our employees are very cautious is that the city of Newark, New Jersey has a huge population of Ecuadorians, and Ecuador has been hit harder than almost anywhere else in the world as far as coronavirus and their inability to handle a surge. So the news that they're getting is really scaring the bejesus out of everybody. So I don't blame them for not coming in. That's why we're not forcing anybody to come in. But it has fortunately kept the people who are part of our community safe.
Yeah. And saying you talk about, some people are coming to work. You've got people working from home, and then that was not enough capacity. So you said you've had to hire new employees. Are you continuing to do that to ramp up capacity? This is very labor intensive manual work, even when it's in your facility, right?
Yes. So we have spent. So an example is on the face shields that we're manufacturing. We have not hired anybody new yet, just to be clear. It's something that we're going to have to do because we don't have enough people with home sewing machines.
Mm-hmm.
The surge in demand for domestic sewing has cleaned out the sewing machine stocks for the country. So we can't even buy machines for our workers right now.
Wow.
And we can't necessarily give them machines because our machines are industrial machines that run on 220 power, which you really can't bring into a house. So at that point, we would need to hire workers. But there are things where we decided, for example, this foam, which we were planning to stitch on, we're now gluing on, and it's going to cost more money to put a double stick tape or a self-adhesive on the back of that. But that's something someone can do from home, and they can also put a stitch here and a stitch here at home. So it's going to enable us to take even the most basic sewing machines and the least skilled sewers and be able to make product that we can ship.
Okay. Wow.
By using new people working from home.
And then you mentioned, or you maybe can elaborate on the supply chain network now of delivering raw material, picking up finished goods. Can you talk a little bit more about how that works and how you've developed and refined that?
So that is that's constantly in flux, depending on. At the beginning, we had people pick up and drop off work. Then, when we had a manageable number, we had one person pick up, just do a circuit around the city, the county, picking up and dropping off work. And then as it expanded beyond that, we had a combination of the two of them. And we have a room set up at the front of our office with a buzzer where someone can come in and make an appointment to pick up and drop off work. They pick up what they've done. So they pick up the new stuff. They drop off what they've done. They get paid by Venmo or PayPal, and they move on. So it's become actually pretty easy. Mm-hmm. And the work comes back to us because we have to sanitize it before we ship it off. So we're doing all the sanitizing in house.
And so one of the things you're talking about here that really makes me think of core lean manufacturing principles is continuous improvement, rapid cycle, and it sounds like you're doing that from the product standpoint. It sounds like every aspect of operations right now is being tweaked and continuously refined, just because you find better ways to do it or the circumstances are changing, right?
Yes, the circumstances are constantly changing. There are supply issues for a lot of the raw materials, even non-FDA approved materials. There's just not a big sewing capacity in this country. We outsourced all of it. Mm-hmm. So non-FDA approved materials, even things that aren't waterproof, were all snapped up to use for any sort of gowns. Elastic is something that's in high demand because it's used in most of the masks that are being made right now. It's very difficult to get a hold of. Sewing machines, I mentioned, sewers. Sewers is something. There's just not a lot of people with sewing experience. We just spent 20 years without sewing being taught really in any schools anymore.
Yeah.
Because career anymore, and clothes are so cheap that who needs to make their own clothes?
Not
Who
much of a hobby.
even fix their own clothes?
Yeah.
They can go to H&M and buy a shirt for $4. So there's just not a lot of sewing out there. So we've had to kind of work around all of those. And I think the thing that I've taken from Lean the most is the continuous improvement, but also the working backwards. You start at the end of the production line, and then you work backwards, and you see how, if we need to ship 50,000 face shields in 2 weeks, what does that look like? Well, we need, starting at the ends, we're going to need to polybag them. We're going to sanitize them. We need new polybags. We need new cartons. We need a way to get them there. We need people to apply the double stick taped foam to the shields. We need someone to count them. You have to work backwards. It's a completely new product line, completely new process from scratch really quickly. And if you try to start at the beginning and project out forwards, you're always going to miss something. But when you start at the end and work backwards, you could really see where your bottlenecks are going to be. And sometimes you can spend your way out of the bottlenecks, and sometimes you can design your way out of the bottlenecks.
Right.
And sometimes you can't get out of the bottlenecks, and you have to figure out an entirely different product.
Yeah. Well, in some organizations, people have more of a mindset of we've designed a product, or we've designed a process, and then people get stubborn and they don't want to admit that they designed something that wasn't perfect. Where I think, in a lean organization, people plan and people try their best, but you realize it's never perfect. Like, when I work with hospitals and we put together a new process, we try to work to the point where it's 85%. We're 85% confident things will work well, but we know it's not perfect, and then we're adaptive in response. And it sounds, I appreciate that. It sounds like you've got that mindset there of saying it's fine that it wasn't perfect. Let's make it better and keep going.
We had to be very honest with our clients. These are a lot of new clients in a lot of new industries. We had to be honest that we not only couldn't get FDA approvals, but we didn't even know how to get FDA approvals. We had to be honest that what we were making might not even work. We've never made this before, but this is what we can make, and you need something like this. We'll continue to supply it to you, and we'll continue to improve it based on the feedback that we get. Mm-hmm. That's really the best that we can do. Yeah. And the demand for these products has really been overwhelming, way more than we could possibly make, which is why we're trying to scale up so quickly.
So you are getting feedback from customers about what they like about how it fits or how it's taken on or off. So you're getting that voice of the customer and putting that back into refining the product, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The first batch that we did, there was a lot of fogging on the front, which meant that there was not enough ventilation between the shield and the face. So we added another layer of foam. There were other issues with the way we put Velcro on, because a lot of workers might not have hair, and the Velcro was scratching their heads. So we switched to elastic. And then there were issues where we found out that the size of the shield we were doing was overkill, and we could make it a little smaller without affecting performance, but that would speed up our delivery because we can cut it a lot faster. So, a whole bunch of issues like that.
Yeah. So you said up front, you weren't sure if they would work, but imagine you're getting a lot of positive feedback that these products are serving their purpose, or it's better than other alternatives, even if it's not 100%, or even though it's not FDA approved. A lot of times, the hospitals, it sounds like they're just trying to get by, right?
Yeah. And we have gotten approvals. This is not really a thing, but we have gotten approvals from the Hospital Association, which is serving in lieu of the FDA approval. And we've gotten approvals from departments of health who've had to approve, for example, the face shields for use in a New York hospital. So, that's serving right now, serving our purpose right now.
Yeah, well, that's great. Can we see you've got a gown behind you? Can you talk a little bit I'm curious, the material and the process to go from what you were doing before to doing these isolation gowns?
Sure. So this is basically an isolation gown. This was a product that before we started making it was disposable and water resistant to water repellent. There's all sorts of levels of medical textiles. Level 1 has some water resistant qualities to it. Level 4 is totally water repellent, and they needed it in a certain level. So one of the things that we did was to take a water resistant fabric. So this will water doesn't go through. This can hold water, but it takes a little bit of penetration for water to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And in certain areas of the gown, we lined it with the fabric that we use to make backpacks.
Oh, okay.
That is waterproof fabric. And that's something that gave the hospitals comfort that this gown could be used for the procedures that they needed it to be used for.
Yeah.
So, we tell people it's between a level 1 and a level 2 gown. We figured out that we needed to make the cuffs really tight so that no air could get through by the hands,
Mm-hmm.
make the neck tie really tight in the back. And all of a sudden we have a gown that we've been able to sell hundreds of thousands of.
Wow.
The product is extremely different from what we've been working on, by the way.
Yeah.
So it involves different types of sewing. It involves different types of cutting materials. And it's definitely a learning process. But at the core, it's sewing. And one thing that is our core competency is sewing. We have sewers. We have a lot of sewers who spent 20 years working on T-shirts or sweatshirts or jackets, and they have a lot of experience, more experience than any management,
Mm-hmm.
working with these sorts of garments.
Yeah. So I imagine there's been a need to get better at rolling out and training people, the new standard work, the new procedures for working with these different types of products.
Yes, there's the training of the sewing of those sorts of operations. But what's been more important and more time consuming is we spent years perfecting our lean lines, our lean production line for baseball caps. And here we have a product that we're used to operating at, say, we use a calculation of efficiency, which is basically the percentage of time a worker spends on value added time. Little wonkish lean talk for you.
For this audience, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay, great. So, and we consider ourselves, we consider it tragic when it's under 80%. But for a new product line like this, we might start out at 25 or 30%.
Right.
And to us, that is an urgent problem because we've projected our costs and we've projected our scheduling based on our usual efficiency. So, we're sitting there saying, okay, why is this going so slowly? Well, obviously the people are sitting 6 feet apart. And maybe we need to, instead of having, maybe we need everything to be at point of use where a person never needs to get out of their chair for anything. People don't know where the raw materials are. People don't necessarily know what to do when there's a problem. So we really have to fast track a lot of that continuous improvement.
And you've been selling these mainly in the tri-state area?
We focused on New York City because that has the biggest need right now, or did last week. It still does, but New Jersey also right now has a very large need. Mm-hmm. Wherever there's a hotspot, we're seeing that's where the interest is coming from. So we've done quite a bit in Chicago, we've done Detroit, and we've done California. That pretty much mirrors where the activity is for these products.
And, a lot of my audience works in healthcare. If they're at an organization where they have a need for shields and gowns, and how can they contact you or Unionwear?
Yeah, probably the best way is to email ppesales@unionwear.com. We still don't have a website set up for these products, but we have our customer service team manning the emails. They can also call 973-497-0102. That's our customer service line. And someone will definitely be able to help them with this information.
Okay. Well, great. Mitch, thank you for taking some time out of what I'm sure is a busy schedule right now as you're pivoting, you're ramping up these new products that are doing a lot of good for people who need them. Any kind of final thoughts that you'd want to share with the listeners or viewers here before we go?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really I'm looking at our economy as something that is about to, as it reopens, it's really going to be out of balance. And I'm looking at it like if we're a production line, we're out of balance. There are going to be major bottlenecks in our economy that no one can anticipate. And the people who I think are the most able to deal with this are domestic manufacturers because we have a lot of experience overcoming imbalances and bottlenecks. And I don't. A lot of people are surprised at how quickly so many manufacturers turned to PPE, but they really shouldn't be because
Mhm.
that's what we've had to do in order to survive. So, I just want the listeners out there to kind of be in tune with what kind of imbalances and bottlenecks are going to happen in our economy, and step up and try to solve them because that's going to be a problem for the next few years.
Yeah. Well, thank you for setting what seems to be such a good example, an inspiring example of problem solving and adaptability. And really, Mitch, thank you for what you're doing. And I'm glad we could talk again. Hopefully, we can catch up again sometime and hear about your progress, whether that's progress in getting back to normal or progress in continuing with what you're doing. Certainly wish you the best.
Thank you very much. I hope it's both.
All right.
All right. Take care.
You too. Thanks.